The attack of Pearl Harbor occurred on December 7, 1941, and the impact of the attack echoed throughout the world. It drew the United States into the Second World War and forever changed the course of history. And among the many places that were transformed was a small mining town deep in the heart of British Columbia. Greenwood might appear to be a typical British Columbian boom and bust town. It was built to support a copper mine and smelter, which began operation in 1901. The mine was productive for nearly 20 years, enough time for a small city to develop. It had hotels, an opera house, 2 newspapers. It flourished in its time and was home to a thriving and successful community. But by the end of the First World War, the global copper market had collapsed, and the smelter was shut down in 1918. Today, a few scattered ruins are all that remain of this enormous facility. The stack from the smelter still stands, and is Greenwood's most visible landmark, along with a vast pile of slag, the byproduct of the smelting process. By the 1940s, only a few hundred people were left in Greenwood, leaving its streets, cafes, and hotels mostly empty. And so they might have remained, had it not been for an unexpected military strike nearly 3,000 miles away. In 1941, the Imperial Japanese forces carried out a devastating attack on the American naval base at Pearl Harbor, and in so doing, raised the specter of increasing military conflict in the Pacific War theater. Canada, a close ally of the United States, immediately declared war against the Empire of Japan. At that time, there were 22,000 Japanese Canadians living and working on British Columbia's west coast. The war had aggravated already existing racial divisions in society. The attack, which was perceived as devious or surreptitious, seemed to confirm suspicions that Japanese Canadians were acting as secret operatives or saboteurs within Canada's borders. This prompted demands for a government solution to what some were calling the Oriental problem. Despite no evidence of disloyalty among Japanese Canadians, they were stripped of their civil rights. Over 1,000 fishing boats, all Japanese owned or operated, were impounded, fulfilling a long-standing desire to break up the Japanese monopoly on the fishing industry. They were fingerprinted and registered by the RCMP. Many had their homes and property confiscated. All of these measures finally culminated in a government order for a mass evacuation of Japanese from the West Coast for reasons of national defense and security. No Japanese were allowed within the protected zone, a 100-mile wide strip of land along the coast. This meant that nearly all of BC's Japanese were forced to relocate to the interior, and the first of these internment centers was Greenwood. Nancy Yamamura, then 7 years old, was one of those people.
I was born in Vancouver in 1934 and have lived in Greenwood for 75 years. In 1942, parents got word that we were to leave Vancouver, and we were treated like an enemy. Hundreds of families had everything valuable taken away, and they had to start from nothing. We were given a choice as to which relocation center we would like to go, and my mother chose Greenwood. When we arrived in Greenwood, I still remember distinctly disembarking that train and how fearful we were. The Mounties are there with their rifles and can deliver us to the different houses and buildings that we were told to go to. And we were housed in this type of accommodation. To this day, I don't know how all those families managed.
Greenwood's Japanese had expected that when the Second World War came to an end, they would be free to return to their homes. In fact, the Canadian government did not allow the Japanese to return to the coast immediately after the war. They were required by law to stay east of the Rockies. In response, the mayor of Greenwood wrote a letter in which he said, quote, "It is natural during war times that racial feelings run high, and on spur of the moment, we are led to make mistakes which would not have been made in peace times. It is the opinion of this council that the Japanese should be spread over Canada, each province taking its share. They should be treated fairly and given the same rights and privileges accorded to other people." And so many Japanese families chose to stay in Greenwood. And over the years, their children grew up in a community that saw beyond the racial divisions of its time. And a handful of those children still live in Greenwood today. There are no monuments to commemorate what happened in Greenwood. There are only the memories of the people who remain. Their story is a cautionary tale, for in Canada's effort to protect itself from a foreign tyranny, it compromised its own values of individual liberty, and thus created an opportunity for tyranny to take hold from within.